Let's clarify heart rate training zones here real quick, because I think a lot of times we're seeing this huge trend on Instagram, TikTok, you name it, especially if you're in the health and fitness space, about zone 2 and heart rate zones and everything like that. The thing that a lot of people forget about when they're talking about zone training is that the more specific you get with it, and you can get really nuanced with all of these different thought lines and even verbiage, it becomes semantic when you start to look at how we actually can apply training with heart rate zones, rating of perceived exertion, and actual training outcomes. Zone 2, because this is the big buzzword right now. Zone 2 is this like magical zone, apparently. Peter Attia made it really, really popular. You see all these people talk about it. Zone 2 is basically this range of heart rate zone where your body essentially is needing to ramp up energy production to where you're getting a lot of oxygen and using an aerobic base for energy production. Okay, so you're getting this substrate usage and this energy production to produce ATP. You're using that oxygen intake from your lungs. When we look at like the zone, a lot of people will tell you it's like 60 to 70% of a heart rate max, 65 to 75% of a heart rate max. The thing is, that's not actually 100% true. What happens is we get to a certain point where there is such a low level of blood lactate, because your body is going to use some anaerobic means to actually create ATP. You get to a certain point where there's just no real increase. There's no real increase in the amount of lactate that's traceable in your blood. You start to get up a little higher, zone 3, right? This is like this tiny little segment where you're kind of getting this equal exchange. You have blood lactate, which is a byproduct of anaerobic respiration, but it's getting utilized and reuptaked into that cycle that's going to allow you to continue to move, okay? It's a little bit more uncomfortable. You start looking at like your zone 4s, that's above a lactate threshold or right at a lactate threshold. And then you look at like your zone 5s, that's like full out maximal effort bouts of exercise. And the thing that a lot of times we get so muddled about is we try to be in these very specific zones. But to actually determine your zones, you need to know where your lactate threshold is. And we need to see where that heart rate takes that jump. We need to see the substrates. For a lot of people, especially if you're not a competitive athlete, doing all that is kind of a waste of time. It's a waste of money. We can be more relative and still get really, really great results in terms of getting into heart rate zones just using basic RPE, okay? If I'm trying to stay in a zone 2, or really just trying to build up the mitochondrial density in my muscle tissue, if I'm trying to increase my body's ability to get rid of waste byproducts from these different metabolic pathways, it's going to be really easy if we can just sit there at a talking pace. If I were on a rower, or if I were on a stationary bike, or if I were even jogging, I should be able to maintain either nasal breathing or should be able to talk a little bit more labored than as I'm talking right now, okay? If I want to be able to build that zone 2 base, that's going to be really, really key. When we start to look at that zone 3, I shouldn't be able to talk, but I should be able to hold that intensity for a substantial amount of time, okay? If we look at 10 as being max effort and 1 as being no effort, right? Zone 2 is going to happen in that like RPE 5 to 6 range. Your zone 3 is going to happen in that zone, probably RPE 6 to 7, sometimes even a little bit up to 8, but most of the time it's going to be that 7. Your zone 4s are that 8 to 9, and obviously your zone 5s are that zone, or like that RPE 10. So let's run through a couple protocols that are going to actually take us to be able to show us how to train these really, really well. The best way that we can start to actually train these different ways or experience the different RPEs related to the zones. 1, stationary bike, nose breathing. It's one of the simplest ways you can try to find at least what that feels like to stay in zone 2. Air bikes work great for this because you get a full body stimulus. Impact, especially jogging, it really isn't a great zone 2 training modality in terms of actually getting into zone 2. We want to be able to move in a way that's going to allow us to maintain an intensity. Every time my foot hits the ground, it's going to basically send me into this eccentric contraction of the heart. It's going to fill, and then I'm going to get this huge ejection from the heart with blood. It's going to skew with my heart rate a little bit more. What we want to see then, if I'm going to train in a zone 2, again, I'm using this in quotations because we're not going to be super specific unless we're doing blood testing and doing the glucose testing or lactate testing in your bloodstream. So when we start to look at training in a zone 2 pattern here, I'm going to nose breathe while on a stationary bike or a rower or something that it's kind of stationary and low impact. I also use step ups with a lot of my clients and athletes who tend not to like those monostructural things. Step ups and bear crawls tend to help people be able to stay in that nasal breathing and be able to manage. You can do a light jog and talk. If you can talk as you lightly jog, that's fine. Don't necessarily base on the pace you see social media influencers doing, because a lot of times they're holding it together enough for these little brief spurts, and then they're gasping for breath and editing their videos in that order to kind of trick you to believe that they're not, or they are in zone 2 when they're actually pushing way beyond that. Okay. Zone 3, one of the better ways to be able to do this is take that same implement, now push it far enough to where you can't breathe through your nose anymore, or you can't hold a conversation. Okay. And then just hang out there. A lot of times that's, like I said, we're going to be in that RPE 6 to 7 range. We're going to start to look at, like, maybe I could say a word or two, or, maybe I can do something. I can hold that pace or hold that cadence for a really long time, but it's not going to be something I'm going to be able to hold for hours. Okay. At some point, there's going to be a break, and there's going to be this sharp rise in how hard I'm having to work. But we want to be able to kind of keep it in that level of intensity where I can't breathe through my nose and I can't talk, but I'm just above that. That's going to be a better guidance for most people in terms of doing zone 3 than just a simple heart rate will. Now, last thing, you're looking like your zone 4s. All right. You're looking at a point where it starts to hurt. You get on a bike. Okay. Again, I like air bikes for this. Get on an air bike, ride that sucker as hard as you can for 4 minutes. Okay. Now you'll notice if you go too hard out of the gate, you're not going to be able to make it 4 minutes at that pace. But we want to be able to start to feel like, all right, I can hold this for an extra minute. So that's our pacing. Okay. That's going to kind of get us into that zone 4. Your legs will start to hurt. Your arms start to hurt. Those are things that are kind of those signs of that buildup of blood lactate. Now, zone 5, and this is the test I like to kind of give people. 15 seconds, all out on an air bike. Find a salt bike, Rogue Echo bike, whatever. Old Schwinn Aerodyne is what I had in my basement as a kid. Okay, you're going to go as hard as you can for 15 seconds. Okay, take the maximum cadence or the maximum RPMs that you get in that 15 seconds. Add 5. That's going to be about max. Okay, most of us can't truly get there. All right, now RPE, I'm going to go back to RPE because this is where it really starts to fit in. If we start to look at a safe way to really max it out and try to figure out what that RPE is, you have a very simple 5-minute protocol. 15 seconds as hard as you can on an air bike, rest for 45 seconds doing absolutely nothing. Repeat that 5 times, okay? Usually by that 5th round, okay, when you try to hit the same tempo or the same RPM that you hit at the very, very beginning, if you can hit it on round 5, chances are you didn't go hard enough. But if you truly went hard enough on round 1, you'll have found a max effort. That max effort will give you at least a perceptual gauge on how to do the rest of that max effort for the rest of the time that you're trying to train. Okay, so going all the way back over this. Your heart rate zones are really based on metabolic states, not actually percentages of heart rate, because those things vary. We have norms that guide us, but know that RPE actually is probably a better guide for a majority of people. Then we start to look at being able to test it. Okay, again, air bike or stationary bike is the best way to go, in my opinion. Okay, and this is just from a decade of coaching people. Max effort for 15 seconds, rest for 45, then having a 4-minute go, right, that allows you to kind of hold the pace, and then obviously you have your nose breathing pacing, okay? Those are different ways that we can start to train and identify roughly those heart rate zones, or at least perceived efforts for us individually. All right. So if you got comments, drop them in the comments below, ask some questions. We'll hop in there, we'll answer some questions. But if you're trying to improve your cardiovascular fitness, that's one of those ways that we like to test it, and trying to help clarify heart rate zone training as it pertains to health and fitness. Hey, if you like that video, go ahead, drop us a subscribe right down here on this little link. Or if you want to check out some of the other stuff we've done, education, lectures, clinics, or check out one of our 500 plus exercise demos, the ways you can level up your training, set your own goals, and change your future.